See if it works. Hitting record.
We're here.
See if it works.
Yep, it works. You're live.
I'm live. Beautiful. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
How's it going?
We're great.
Yeah, we just came
Nice.
off of a really good demo, and Varun came because we're in phone booths next to each other, and he came out and he was like, "That was really good." I was like, "Get back in there. We got the webinar."
That's amazing. Yeah, we'll give people a few minutes to get going here. But yeah, I mean, the demo that you and I were on Wednesday, like I was kind of the same boat, like 126 SDRs. It's like, shoot, that's a lot of stuff you can take off their plates.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just we think that it's so interesting, and I forget if you were a part of this LinkedIn post or maybe we just found it, but Zoom Info literally only sells things because they're the biggest brand on the market, and nobody else knows that there's other data tools to go to, and they're probably like the worst investment that you could make.
Are we live?
And
We're live. You got it.
I'll say that. I'll say that about Zoom Info. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Great. Hi, Greg.
Hey, man. How's it going?
Hey, Gray. So heads up, we're live on YouTube. We're letting a few more people jump in here. So it's ramping up. This is going to be a pretty casual one. We're going to talk. That's all right. Good. We're going to talk. These guys just jumped off a demo with a pretty big company, short name you've probably heard of. So they're fist bumping and getting excited and doing jumping jacks.
Tesla.
With SDRs.
Blue Origin.
I'd like to speak to you about your Model 3 desires.
How many people do we have right now?
Not a ton right now, but we're it's starting to increase.
Cool.
So I mean, I think let's get into it here. This is going to be a pretty casual one. So if you're listening in, if you're on the YouTube, come say hello and chat. Let us know where you're dialing in from. Man, I'm like, where you're zooming in from. I don't know what the word is. Dialing in just makes so much sense to me. But let us know where you're from, where you're listening from today. There's the one. Basically, the goal, we're going to talk today about intent data. And I'm going to try and kind of host the conversation and not talk too much, but I apologize because I'm going to get excited about certain things. And I share Eric's disdain for certain data providers that are very large and very incumbent and very expensive. Because I mean, I think there's whenever I look at a data provider, and maybe we can start at data providers, because that is kind of when I look at like what we're going to talk about today, it's intent data. It's how do you build your own intent data? And we're going to layer in where and why and when ChatGPT. If you've listened or if you've tried ChatGPT, you've probably gone through and been like, okay, there's been some okay messaging that you can get out of ChatGPT. There's other tools out there that do email writing and things like that. And they're okay. They're not great. They're not terrible. If you don't know how to write cold email copy, they're probably a pretty good step up. But I'd say the four of us on this call could probably do a much better job on average for most campaigns. The place where you can get really deadly with ChatGPT is feeding it context. I had a conversation with ChatGPT last night, and I probably went back and forth 25 messages, iterations on a message. And at the end, I was like, hey, spit out this prompt. And the best thing that I was able to do was say, okay, I'm going to take this prompt. Now I'm going to throw it into Clay, and all the things that I was giving to ChatGPT manually, now I can build my multi-step enrichment process in Clay and then feed it that context. So I did all this work. It took me an hour and a half to get the prompt exactly tuned the way I liked it. But now I could take that hour and a half work, and I don't have to redo it for every prospect. I can have it scaled up and pushed to every prospect. I can modify it for the job title. And so this is where I think enrichment plus AI starts to get really, really deadly. I want to start with data though, because if you don't have good data in, you're not going to be able to get this enrichment. I want your take. Here's my personal opinion. And just for clarity, like I'm not paid by Clay. I don't get any benefit other than maybe if they sign up, we've got like a referral link, but I don't think we're even sharing that here. So like I have no vested interest in being on this other than like, I think it's a cool tool. We're using it and we like it. I think Clay's going to change the data landscape in sales development. I think it's going to be tough times for ZoomInfo because I think they got a great set of data for a very certain specific market. But I think with Clay, you can access 50 different data providers that is probably encompasses a much better reach than what you get with ZoomInfo. So I'd love to start with the data landscape. Eric, I know you're in Clay and you have your own agency. What's your take on the data landscape and where we're starting?
So the data landscape is both highly fragmented, but also way too similar to be working for a sales team to actually make use of. And so what I mean by that is fragmented data is if you're looking for technographic data, if you're looking for intent data, we could say that as well. If you're looking for jobs data, if you're looking for Amazon reviews data and all these things, there's no tool that puts all of them into one place. And it makes sense. They're not incentivized to put them into one place. If Apollo or ZoomInfo or Seamless were to come out with a Yelp review scraper, how many companies in their database would even have Yelp reviews? Because how many of them are even on Yelp? And then that being said, how many users are even going to use it? And so if you are a person who needs Yelp reviews or any of this special data, you need to go start in one place, bring it to another, verify it in another, and do this multi-step enrichment process. So it's very fragmented if you want to do something custom for yourself. If you don't have any custom ideas, though, you literally have access to the same amount of data, no matter who you choose. And I know at the beginning, I took a bomb on ZoomInfo, and it's because they are giving you essentially the same data that everyone else has, but they're charging you $1 per contact when Apollo is charging you 2 cents per contact. And even if ZoomInfo is better, are they? Don't do math on the internet live, but are they 50 times better than what Apollo is? I don't think so. And so now you're working with Apollo, you're working with Seamless, you're working with LeadIQ, ZoomInfo, Sales Intel, all of these tools where they get all of their data from the same place, LinkedIn. And so you're basically picking a LinkedIn scraper tied with an email validation tool. And that's what you're essentially evaluating, right? And so now you pick one of these tools and you have all of the same data as everybody else and you have nothing special. And if you say the same thing to every single person on your list, you're saying nothing to every single person on your list. And so that's where I think the biggest problem in these data tools is that it's very, very tough to juggle all of these custom data sources if you want to say something more sophisticated at scale. And you also have this problem of like you and every other sales rep in the entire world has access to this data. And so there's no differentiation across all of it.
I love that. I want to throw a differentiation. I think all of us probably know what you're talking about when you say ZoomInfo has access to the same data as everybody else. But Varun Gray, I'd love your comments on like maybe the distinction between like retail and wholesale data. And Varun, I know you've maybe negotiated with a bunch of these contracts. So if you can't say, I'm happy to say, because so your perspective on what Eric had mentioned about the sort of retail, wholesale, and everybody having access there. And then we'll throw it to Gray on data and data quality and kind of the shape of where different data providers are strong.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that it's kind of funny because when I was first learning about this space a couple of years ago, I was in these WhatsApp groups and stuff, and there are people who were like, "Hey, I need X," and they're like, "Okay, great. I need 500 emails for this thing," and they're like, "Great, that'll be $500." And then it's $1 per email. I'm like, and at the time I was like, oh, that's an interesting little cottage industry that's popped up here, and interesting arbitrage that people are doing, but I didn't totally understand it at the time. And then now that I know the intricacies of the data costs and stuff like that, I mean, these people are literally making 100x markup on the cost, because at the end of the day, an email, especially from an email guessing tool, is a relative commodity at a penny a piece, or maybe a little bit less or a little bit more. And a lot of this data, like at the end of the day, these really big products, whether it's People Data Labs or LinkedIn or ZoomInfo or whatever, they're all getting a lot of this core firmographic and people information from one place, and that place is LinkedIn.com. That's where all the information lives. And some people are doing it in a positive, compliant, like good way. Some people are doing it in a less appropriate way, and then there's a mix between. But everyone's getting some data from that. And then there's contact information, and sometimes there are databases that are valuable, and that's why a Datagma maybe can charge like 35, 40, 45 cents a phone number or something, because it's hard to get in really high quality. But a lot of this data is commoditized, and then you have like really the thing is there's always new data that's coming out, right? And there's always new techniques and new things, and there's really enterprising entrepreneurs who go out and find that and get that little niche, and then the ZoomInfos of the world just like gobble them up and then find it and add them in. Whereas I think the approach we're trying to take is we want those businesses to be successful, and we don't white label them. We just say, hey, here you are, and like let's be your distribution for you, and let's get you more customers, and let's help you build your business and make it like a two-way street.
Love it. I totally agree. There's more I want to add, but I want to throw it to Gray. Your thoughts on the sort of data industry as a whole, and different strengths of providers, or anything we've talked about just in the last minute or two here.
Yeah, I think depending on what you're doing and your use case and your product, sort of all the variables, there are certain solutions that times when you say, hey, ZoomInfo is great for me, they do have some really interesting things that they can do. So not to rip on them too much, because I know I'm guilty of that as well. If you've got a small number of accounts and it's really important to you to be able to blow up an org structure and do some other research like that, it is a helpful tool for sure. The vast majority of people, or at least that I've seen, really, they just want the contact data. They just want the emails and the phone numbers. And so that's when you start to experiment with other vendors. And people used to say like, oh, the best data tool is how many can you afford? And I know coming from a company that was venture backed, I was always asking for like, oh, you already have ZoomInfo and LeadIQ. Why do you need Apollo? And I was like, oh, it's kind of hard to explain, but I just need it.
Coverage.
Yeah, coverage, exactly. And then you're in a situation where, if you have your SDRs or your AEs or your sales team in there, they all have licenses. So they're checking ZoomInfo first. Like, nothing there. So then they go to LeadIQ and like, okay, maybe I got a mobile here, and let me double check that with Apollo, and maybe that's a different credit. And so it can be complex to stay on top of all the tools. And then you're adding them into Salesforce and you're making sure that's all logged correctly. So in an effort to get the best data possible, you end up adding a ton of complexity into your organization.
100%. I remember in the early days one of the hardest decisions as like a founder of an agency was like, do I go with the ZoomInfo or DiscoverOrg? Or like, do you try and piece it? This was a number of years ago, before obviously ZoomInfo and DiscoverOrg became the same organization. But I remember sitting there and I'm like, oh, we've used Net Prospects. They got bought by Hoover's or Dun & Bradstreet. Now, do we make the switch to ZoomInfo, and ZoomInfo strong here and DORG is strong here? And everybody, if you were to look at it, there is no like one best provider. There's like this categorically the best. You could say ZoomInfo is certainly the biggest, but I think if you were to look at like them versus LeadIQ or them versus whatever, the accuracy and the quality is going to depend on the market you're going after. If you're going after really large companies, the DiscoverOrg data set used to be excellent. I don't know what the quality is now. I say used to be because I haven't used it in the last 2 years. Was really, really excellent. If you're going after sort of mid-range companies, DORG wasn't that good. They didn't have that much coverage. So the answer is like, it totally depends on who you're going after. The thing that I love about Clay is I don't have to make those decisions anymore. I don't have to say, oh, is it this or that? Is it Apollo? Is it this? Is it, LeadIQ? Is it all of these? I can go in, and this is just starting with the contact data. I can say, okay, I want these 7 different providers. It's all one Clay credit. So I think that to me feels like a superpower. Because I used to be the guy in the early days that would have to download it from Net Prospects, upload it to Zero Bounce, download it from Zero Bounce, go and verify that with like the other providers. I had like a 5-page document on like how to do all this back when we did Net Prospects. We even had one that we had to like yeah, we had engineers that would like query stuff on the command line, and it was janky. And now you can do it all in basically what is basically a Google Sheet, a supercharged Google Sheet.
I know your pain. I mean, I got into it, you know, a little bit later, so maybe I had some more tools at my disposal. But yeah, even just email validation is like a ridiculously painful process. Now and then with Clay, because I thought Gray was going to say something. Even with email validation, you know, so many reps just don't do it because they're like, oh, I don't want to get like waste the time, and you know, it takes forever. And it's like, yeah, I know, but
Us.
you know, and it does take forever. But now with Clay tables, it's so great because one, a lot of the emails come back valid anyway, or then two, you could just set it and forget it. And it's like, okay, find my emails, validate the emails, push to my sequencer, hands off. You know, and it's so easy to refill leads now. Even that alone is just such a lifesaver.
100%. I love that I don't have to go into multiple tools. This, I promise to everybody, this isn't just how much I love Clay webinar. We're going to get into the interesting stuff. I thought it was just important to kind of lay the foundation. And then for those that are listening, Rami, thanks for joining. Rami's got a digital agency, or is targeting digital agencies, wants to reach the founders. They offer business process optimization services. So we're gonna talk a little bit about Rami and how we could possibly reach those. Maybe we'll do some screen sharing a little bit later. But what we're going to start doing is like a couple of different ideas for, okay, this is how we get not just like the base data, because the base data is, if we were just talking about the base data, it's like, when I say the base data, the conversation we just had the last 15 minutes of you don't have to have Zoom info and net prospects and lead IQ and this and this and that. That's valuable in itself. That's going to save you as an SDR, as an SDR manager. That's going to save you a ton of time. But it doesn't give you superpowers, right? It doesn't help you do more than your other SDRs. And so what I want to talk about now is like, once you've mapped, you know, I'm going to draw a distinction. I think the old way of doing sales development, and there's a new way. And I think the old way was go into Zoom info, build a list, and the hardest decisions that you're making or not making that you don't realize are crazy important, the filters on that list, right? Like if you're an SDR and you're deciding the account filters on the list that you're downloading from Zoom info, like I can't remember who said it, but you're basically outsourcing your go-to-market to the lowest, to the most junior member of your sales team, right? It's absolutely crazy that people have that much control, because who we target, who we sell to, who our target customer is, and who the best potential customer is, that's a CEO, that's a CRO, VP level decision. And I don't mean to offend SDRs, but like, you shouldn't have to make that decision. You should be given guidance based on what everybody in the organization has learned is going to give you the best chance of booking that meeting that's going to turn into a closed won opportunity. And so the thing that I love is we're moving from list base, where, you know, maybe you had target accounts in Salesforce. The list base is the old way. Mapping your total addressable market is the new way. And that's the thing that's most excited, because this is, as a VP of sales or a CRO, this is the most important. This is where everybody starts, right? This is what everybody's looking for in terms of like how you're thinking about the market, the map they did with their VP of sales. And so I want to talk maybe Gray and then Eric on the sort of difference between like a list-based process versus a kind of a account total addressable market process.
Yeah. Happy to jump in there. So in terms of like a list process, a really simple way, and you know, I'm still guilty of this, is you kind of just go on Sales Nav and you search a couple titles that are interesting to you. And that populates like thousands of results. And you just start one by one going through, being like, I'll take that person, I'll take that person. Doing it from an account base is a much better way. But it used to be really complicated. Actually, the way a team I ran in the past used to do it is we were selling to startups, and you'd go to Crunchbase, you'd have a list of filters, and you'd download that, upload it into Google Drive, you have a sheet, and you'd go through it one by one. Open up that account on LinkedIn, you'd find the people you want to talk to at that account. And it was super manual. Then you find that person on LinkedIn, use LeadIQ plus ZoomInfo plus what other tools, you add it to Outreach, and you do that half your day, every day is doing. And it was way more effective. Moving on to like, hey, these are the accounts that matter to us. Let's start with those people specifically. The problem with that was obviously how time consuming it was. you're at half your day is research, and being hyper focused on the accounts that matter to you, like literally half your day. The other half of your day is trying to get those personalized emails out and those cold calls. And it had a really good conversion rate, but it was definitely quite a bit slower. You're always trying to balance that with like the list approach versus the account approaches. List is very fast. It's very, very fast. The account piece of it is a little bit harder. It takes a little bit more strategy and training. But the conversion rates are typically quite strong.
And I think that's the balance, or that's the trade-off that you're always trying to make as an SDR or SDR leader, is like, is this am I going to trade volume for conversion, right? And like when and where's the right time? But I'll throw it to Eric now. I don't want to jump in too much here.
And so just to be clear, the question is around like which approach is better, the list approach or the account approach?
Just, I think, what is your take on the total addressable market approach and sort of mapping the whole market, identifying signals and going from there, versus like starting in ZoomInfo or starting in Apollo with like a set of criteria or a list of accounts that somebody's added to your Salesforce?
Yeah. And so, this was back when like, you didn't just get so many, everyone talks about like, AI is dehumanizing sales and like all of these things. And it's like, guys, that's really not true. We take technological advances like far more seriously than what they really are today. Because when we talk about, using AI in sales, like the dehumanization of sales really happened when LinkedIn came around, and now you could like just guess everybody's email addresses. And so this even became just a thing that you had to do, because before LinkedIn, the only thing you could do to make sales was literally open up the yellow pages and just start calling people. Like you had no targeting at all of what you could do. And so I think there's a lot of people who still come with that mindset of, oh, like if we just build a list of chief marketing officers with 50 to 150 employees, like we're going to crush it. Like we know exactly what we're doing here. And, it's so funny because I look back and I'm like, the things that I'm doing today, if I was doing them 2 years ago, would crush if we could, take it back in time. And I think that's always going to be true. And so I know this is kind of a roundabout way of getting here, but I think that to that question, I think there is now a need of not only being able to collect your target addressable market, with which I talk to a ton of companies who don't even know how to do that, who can, build a list of all of the companies that just are a fit in general. Not only do you have to collect the target addressable market so you can message them, you have to score them so like, should I even reach out to these people? And then the problem comes of people just don't even have good ideas of how to score companies. And they don't even have good ideas or good hypotheses to test against those scoring. And so we're going from this place of where you could just start at, level 1, where it's like, just open up the yellow page and just call anybody if they have a pulse. And now we're going to keep on going until, and I say this all the time, where Outbound is going to have to turn into an ads network one day, which is like, the only reason I'm even reaching out to you is because you fit 7 different pieces of criteria. And that's the only reason you're ever going to even open my email and respond to it, is because it's just so dang targeted. Otherwise, everything is going to go to the wayside. And that's where we have to keep going to.
I totally agree. I was having a conversation with a marketer 8 years ago, and they said to me, like, your channel is working, sales, like cold email is working exceptionally well right now. This is 8 years ago. It's like, just keep in mind, like, it's all channel arbitrage, right? We're all looking for that edge that has this exceptionally high reply rate, throughput rate, cost to acquire, whatever it is. Every marketer, every growth hacker, every demand side marketer, salesperson is looking for that channel, right? This is going to be the constant. And so when you say like sales dev is getting harder, is because you have all these people who are incentivized to try and find the new, the best, the lowest cost to acquire a customer. What we saw with cold email, like the original cold email, you could send 100 emails and get 10 to 25 responses without follow-ups on like a pretty mediocre copy email. It was, anyway, couple years later, that like those numbers like started plummeting, and then people moved to the personalized at scale, and then it was like everything was individual personalized, and there was personalized to the account, and then there was the Netflix boxes, and then there was the videos, right? These are all different channels, different ways we can reach prospects. They all, when they first came out, I bet you the first like 1,000, maybe the first 100,000 people that received a Vidyard were like, whoa, this is blowing my friggin' mind right now. This guy sent me a video. Now I get a video and I'm like, I don't care. It says like, hi, Colin, in like the whiteboard. And I'm like, I know that's AI generated. Like,
Yeah.
it's
I
not,
think
it's
I'm
not
wearing a
unique anymore.
Vidyard shirt right now, actually.
I love it.
Got it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Once upon a time.
There's
Yeah,
even
and I
like,
don't
have you
mean,
heard of have you heard of Tavis? They're doing the like AI video personalizations, and they're like really. I've heard they're pretty good, and they're uh a lot of salespeople are starting to use it, and actually they're using it in tandem with Clay, which is interesting. But I think some of these things are getting pretty sophisticated, which is really interesting to see.
totally. Is that like deep faking yourself
Yeah, the
to,
deep fake stuff. Yeah.
yeah, that's wild. Yeah. I mean, how long before your cold calls are like just deep fakes, or like your voicemails are deep fakes that are like you throw it to a clay table and there's like a, anyway, I don't want to
No,
spin too far out of
Hopefully I'm
control here.
retired. Hopefully I'm retired by then. Fingers crossed.
No,
Planning
Gray.
for it.
Gray, it's happening in like 3 months. I saw this AI called 11 Labs that it was like the only thing that I don't like about it is it doesn't change the volume of the voice. But other than that, it was perfect. I was like, I had it right. Like I wrote in and I was like, hey, this is Sarah leaving a voicemail for Jack. I'm calling from Clay. Don't even worry about responding to this voicemail. I'm sending you an email right after this. And it sounded perfect. The only thing that I don't like I said, is the volume stays the same the entire time, which is not natural. But if they just add like a little bit of volume differentiation, I don't think anybody would be able to tell. Really, the only thing stopping people from doing that is that it's illegal. So
Yeah, the tools, all the pieces
God.
exist. It's just somebody needs to put them all together.
Yeah.
And again, legislation, which I think is a good thing. I do want to get to, we got Rami, I see Yash in here agreeing that he actually thinks that there's a case to be made that AI is humanizing sales. And Yash, I'd love more context and more thoughts on that. What do you all think? And then we'll get to Rami's digital agency. And as I say this, if you're listening in the chat and you've got we're going to start getting into like the nuts and bolts of what makes Clay really interesting. We're going to start building some targeting and some of this, like going from a TAM into some intent signals that you can generate yourself. So if you've got an example of a company you want us to try and give you a couple ideas of how you can do this yourself, then throw who you're targeting and your offer into chat, and I'll make sure we try and get to everybody. So humanizing sales, AI. What do y'all think?
Yeah. Because and I talk about this all the time, is, people are like, AI is this like crazy new invention. And it's this gigantic technological leap forward. And I remind everybody that we are basically out of technology leaps forward. We are basically in a world of like technological increments. And what I mean by that is like, the difference of productivity that the world got when we switched from the only way that communication could be sent was like letters on the back of like horses in the Pony Express to the telegraph was a far different technological change than going from like the telegraph to the phone, right? Because like the time is still different. Now the media just changes, right? But like you went from 3 weeks of time to like instant, and now we're just like in a world of increments. So anytime people talk about like AI is such a like a leap forward and everything, it's like, really, it's like just putting like, it's dispersing labor. It's giving you more opportunity that you don't have to like hire humans to do, but like we were always able to do these things. You're just like reducing the time for it to be done. So what really dehumanized sales was the invention of LinkedIn, and then email validation getting so cheap that I could just guess Gray's email address. Like I was speaking to a sales leader, and he was like, I get so many of these emails. I wonder like how they find my email address. And I'm like, well, what's your email address? And he goes, first name @domain.com. I'm like, and we could just guess that. Like, what do you mean you're like confused of how people are finding your email address? And so I if people really wanted to take the human element out of it, they would make their emails like eric1@clay.com. You would never ever get a cold email if you did that. And people just don't care much about it. So now going more into the humanizing side of it, who cares? Like if I get an email and somebody says something that's a problem that I'm facing right now, it's written about how they solve that problem relevant to my position and what I'm doing now, I do not care if it was written by AI. I don't care if it was written by a human. I don't care if you had your grandmother write it and then just put it in like the emails all day, because you can't write. You got to like increase your output.
Yeah.
I would
love-
care if Graham did that. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, yeah, yes. All right, yeah. Kudos to Graham. But so I really don't care. And so when people are talking about like, oh my gosh, these people are using AI, like I helped a kid who's 20 years old, first startup. He got into Y Combinator. This is his first startup. He sent 263 emails. I taught him a GPT-4 prompt, and I was like, dude, this is gonna crush. Just trust me. Because he was like, I'm not sure if I can afford clay. And I was like, don't even worry about it. Like, just do this thing. You'll be able to afford clay after this. 264 emails out, freaking like 36 positive responses on the other side. And I was like, told you, like this is, and so who cares if it dehumanizes it? The message is just going to get so much better if you harness it well.
Varun, care to weigh in?
No, I agree. I don't have too much to add. I think that I'd love an inbox full of people trying to solve my actual problems, you know?
Yeah.
I'd love a queue of people who are just racing to solve my problems, you know? Great, I'll give you my money if you can actually solve my problem, you know? So
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
I was having a conversation with somebody who teaches like founders how to sell yesterday, and like the value that a salesperson adds in the process is not the telling the buyer the price in the right way or highlighting features. Like people can read all that stuff now. You're going to ask for reviews, and you're going to ask for references, and you're going to do all this. The value of a salesperson in a sales role is that you understand the problem space exceptionally well. If you're a buyer, you're buying something in a problem space that you're probably not familiar with, because chances are, if you're buying an email, like not many people are going to go and be like, oh, I bought ZoomInfo and then I bought, if you're buying a list provider for the first time, that's probably like there's a lot, most of the purchases are going to be people doing their first time purchase. And maybe that's a bad example because maybe you would buy multiple list providers, but I don't know, say you're buying like a sequencer or a piece of software. It's your first encounter with the problem space. The salesperson's job is to understand the problem space, the shape of their solution in terms of the things that it solves well. And the goal of the salesperson is to understand the shape of your problem, right? And see, hey, like literally, is it a fit? What's the shape of our tool? What's the shape of your problem? Does it fit? Great. Okay, perfect. It's going to be awesome. No, not going to fit. Amazing. And I think what I love about what you can do with the TAM approach is you can build out your whole TAM, and you can say, okay, what makes this problem more likely to be top of mind for this individual? And you can create your messaging in a much more, to Yash's point, human way, because you can make these inferences about, okay, I know you're a sales leader at a company like this. I see that you have 12 SDRs and this many AEs and this many CSMs. I suspect you're probably running into this problem. Is that a fair assessment? And like that is a much more human relevant email. And like you can certainly do that manually, and that's a ton of work. And I have sent that email manually, but with things like AI, you're able to kind of scale that up. And I want to throw it to Gray, and then we're going to get on Rami's agency targeting and how we can prospect better for Rami.
Yeah, just on the TAM approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in terms of AI, like it's super good, but all it's doing is writing emails that people were going to write anyways. It's not like writing Shakespeare and sending it to people. It's just, you train an SDR with like, hey, this is like sort of the 4 or 5 different ways that you can personalize to have the biggest impact. And if you can't find any of those ways, you probably shouldn't be reaching out to them. And that's all AI is doing. So it's really just like an extra tool in the tool belt. As someone asked me today and said, hey, would you rather have AI writing your emails or the ability to sequence and have like an email sequencer? I'd still pick email sequencer. So it's not, I almost agree that I don't know if it humanizes or dehumanizes it. I think it's just a tool. It's like, hey, did the phone call humanize or dehumanize? It's like saying like, hey, cell phones dehumanize sales because now you're calling people instead of just going to their business with some Timbits and some coffee. If you're Canadian, you know what those are. But yeah, go to some Dunkin' Donuts, to your the business and stopping in, which is like older way to do it. My first sales job, but yeah, I think it's just another tool. I don't really understand the argument of like humanizing or dehumanizing, to be honest.
Fair. All right, so let's get into Rami as promised. And so Rami is targeting digital agency founders. They're looking for a better way to prospect. Rami, can I assume that you've been doing the standard sort of list-based, buy a list or build a list and, write some messaging, send it out kind of stuff. And then the thing that I'm going to ask you, and I imagine the group is going to have questions here. This is either targeting founders for business process optimization services. So when you look for a customer, or when you look at a customer on LinkedIn, or when you are talking to a customer live, what are the things that you are asking them that are going to be indicators that, hey, it's a good time? And specifically what I'm looking for is like, are they hiring? Are they hiring a certain role? Are they using a certain technology? Are they doing a certain thing that's public? And so like, what are some of the things, Rami, that you're looking for? I'll throw it to Gray. Kind of where would you start with this from like an intent, trying to find like intent signals? So we'll go and Gray, Varun, and then Eric. What intent signals would you look for?
Yeah, I think attention to those, it's like the consultant answers, it depends. But I think intent signals, it totally depends on like the size and type of companies you're reaching out for. So for an example of that, would be if you're targeting some smaller startups and you're going after the C-suite and founders, they like view this startup as their child. They're so proud of it. So you can totally personalize about the account, like make it all about the account and all the great things they're going to do and like all the great places they're going to go. It's going to have more impact than you personalize on the founder themselves, at least in my experience. As you go up into the mid-market and enterprise, complimenting somebody who works at AT&T about how great AT&T is probably going to fall in deaf ears to the director of IT you're targeting or whoever. So then at some point you have to decide, hey, when do I pivot to focus on the individual? And so that would be like the two areas you're looking. So for like an account-based intent triggers would be like growth, funding, product launches, hiring for key roles. And the individual is going to be kind of what they put out there. Like what do they have on their LinkedIn description? What kind of previous roles have they had in the past? What can you point to show that what you're saying is relevant? Yeah, those are mine at least.
Cool.
Love it. We'll go to Varun in a sec. I just want to, Rami mentioned one indicator they look for is an inactive social media presence at the agency level. So Varun, Eric, with that signal, what are your thoughts? Where would you start?
Yeah, that's cool. I think there are a couple of things, right? I think before answering that question directly, just the broader answer here. I think a lot of what Gray said is totally true. I think it's about working your way back from what their problem is that you're solving. And so some examples of that, right? Like Eric has something where, he looks to see if they have a DMARC record or not, to then sell against, right? Because that would indicate something about about whether or not they have this. One of our customers that makes CSV software looks to see if they have documentation in place about CSV software, because if they do, that would indicate that they're not doing a great job with the CSV stuff, right? So what are these little signals, even if you don't think it's possible to identify them programmatically, that indicate that, and making a list of those signals is like really powerful. But yeah, on the social media side, like there are different ways of getting to that, right? So maybe inactive means they have a really small following. They have 20 followers, 30 followers, 40 followers on LinkedIn and Twitter and whatever. That's one way. Maybe it's like they just haven't posted very, very often. So you can scrape their posts from LinkedIn and Twitter and see, when the last tweet was. And so you can use those data points as indicators to qualify these folks better.
Yeah, and when I think about a successful outbound campaign here, I think the first thing that I would ask Rami, and maybe he'll answer it by the time I talk about some other things, is like, what is business process services? Or like, what precisely do you mean by that? Like, I was talking with a friend who wanted to start an automation agency, and I was like, of course you can't get outbound prospects because they have no clue what you would do. And so I think the first thing that I would do, if especially if Rami has a lot of case studies, is I would just look at the people that he crushed it for. And then if it was lawyers, actually, I wouldn't do cold outreach to lawyers if you can avoid it. If it was if well, it's digital agencies. So sorry. So it's digital agencies anyway. He's targeting digital agencies for some reason. I actually think that, yeah, there's intent signals that you could look for, but what I would be doing with this campaign is like using AI to analyze what kind of digital agency they are, and then and this is going to take some setup, but then tying that type of digital agency to another digital agency that you have a case study for. So in the email, you can tell them clearly, like, if you work with us, these are the things that we did for another agency, and this was the impact that we had. Which I know this is like a webinar about intent, but oftentimes cutting to that is probably the better thing to be doing there. Yeah, a lot of things around being able to scrape, if their last LinkedIn post was, 24 days ago or 30 days ago, then that's a great social media, presence thing where they don't have time to be posting and things like that. Trying to think of anything else. If they're hiring for somebody who takes care of a process that you automate, that's another one. One thing that we're having a lot of success with too is just using AI to just even come up with business service automation or business service processes that you could do for them. And so what we're basically doing is using ChatGPT and then entering the description of the company, and then we'll train it on like 3. So like it'll be the user input of the first one we'll do is like, using the input, give me business processes that this company probably needs to have done. This is the input, and the input is their company description. And then, you'd say like, return the response in 3 bullet points, keep the output under 20 words, and be specific and creative about the output. Then you would go to the assistant in the API and you would train it like, okay, if this were me as a salesperson reaching out to this company, what would I say to these people? And you'd put it in 3 bullet points. Repeat that process 2 more times, and now you've just trained ChatGPT. When you see this description, say these things. And then we'd plug in all the LinkedIn company descriptions, and you could literally email them and be like, hey, not sure if you're seeing these problems. When we work with other digital agencies, they usually need these things automated. I had some ideas for you. Are you thinking about automating your accounting so that you could fulfill SEO services better for your customers? Are you, 1, 2, 3, we help people with this case study. Would you be interested? And that would be like another way that I would probably think about that one too. But I would also really just double down on the things that you've done and use AI to make sure that you're connecting the dots on the right people.
Mm-hmm. And I think just to build on your point, I love that, this is how you can use our services. I think where ChatGPT gets really valuable in the process, on top of just like, using Clay to scrape the signals and find the things and then insert them as variables, right? Like, because you could very well do that and say, hey, I think you're doing this. And then you do a big if then statement. Gets really complicated. But if you're able to feed the sort of, I think what I've been noticing, and I'd love everybody else's thoughts here. I think if you can feed 3 pieces of context to ChatGPT and have it come up with it, and have it restate that with those 3 pieces considered, I'm getting much better outputs for my emails, as opposed to just like, okay, it's this one single piece of like, here's the company description and tell me what we could do for them. It's here's the company description, here's my description, here's another piece of context, and like talk to me about how this is relevant, or talk to the prospect about how this particular piece is relevant to them specifically, which I think is restating what you just mentioned. But to me, it's the critical piece there is the 3 elements of 3 different elements that you're injecting into the prompt.
Yeah, definitely agreed. And actually I'm testing with a couple of the enterprise companies in Clay right now of like, all right, what are your SDRs research already? And they're like, well, we look at the company summary and we look at the person summary, we look at their job title, and we do all this. I'm like, okay, great. I'm going to give you 6 of those, and you're going to tell me what we're going to say. And we're still training it that way. And we're getting some crazy, awesome emails written by giving them 6 profiles, and then they do all the inputs. So it's user assistant, user assistant, user assistant. And if anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about there, it's how you communicate with the ChatGPT API. And so user is, when you're typing into ChatGPT, you're the user. And when it responds, that's the assistant. And so in the API, you can tell it, when you see this input, say this thing, so you can start training it on what you like. And I was doing this with a customer 2 days ago or something like that. And, he would say, oh, okay, I would look at these inputs and I would say this thing. And I would look at these inputs and I would say this thing. And it was crazy good what we were getting on the other side of like 6 examples.
I love the training element as well, because that's something that, like, to my point earlier, I did that in ChatGPT last night. But that's hard to go back and forth. And like, I don't want to replicate that for every single account, and being able to do that at scale is super valuable. Gray, I'm curious. So we're targeting for Rami. She's targeting founders of agencies, digital agencies. What are some plays or some things that you might do sort of outside of, it could be, doesn't have to be specific to AI, but what are some plays that you might think about for somebody like Rami?
Yeah. So typically what you want to do, set up like your core filters, like get a tight list of potentials, right? Like there's some companies that you simply don't want to work with. If they have 10,000 employees, I'm guessing that's probably not a good company for you. So just go through the obvious ones to trim that down. Yeah, and then you know, like working back from some pain, like I think that's a great idea. Is just kind of digging into what exactly you do. Really focused on pain, because they're not going to book a meeting for you, see your product or your service, right? They're booking a meeting because they have this pain. So working back from that pain and then like figuring out basically what would the triggers be, or like the profiles that are public information be that would say like, hey, likely they have this pain. You're not going to get it right 100% of the time. If you do, you know, you'll take off. But you know, you're looking for like a good outbound conversion rate. Like, hey, if you can get 2 to 3% of these people that you reach out to are positive and they're booking meetings with you, you're kind of in that benchmark of what, you know, you want to be aiming for. Like that's good. There's nothing, not amazing. It's not terrible. So that's how you're evaluating success. And then you want to make sure that you're doing A/B testing when you're doing this. So like, okay, I'm making this assumption that if they don't have any followers, that they have this pain, and I'm going to solve that for them. That assumption might turn out to be wrong, because they might say, hey, our business doesn't need this. This is like the social media follower thing, right? So our business doesn't need this. Like, social is just isn't a channel for us. Like we're more brick and mortar, we're more old school. Like it doesn't really help us. And so that assumption might be wrong. Might be like, okay, well, like 0 followers, that means that this business simply doesn't care about this. But maybe 10 to 20 followers, that's the sweet spot. You can say, hey, clearly they put in some effort. And maybe they want to grow this. You can even look for like ramping. Like, are they making more and more and more posts? Or maybe how many posts to follower ratio? They make 100 posts a month and they only have 10 followers. Chances are they think that social is a super important channel for them. And so those are the types of like getting really creative and looking at what is this company doing that would indicate that maybe they have this pain that I can solve.
Totally. Varun, care to weigh in?
I don't have too strong of an opinion on this one.
Okay. I've got a thing I was thinking, I was like, as Gray was talking, I'm like, this is what I would do in Clay, right? Is however you want to do it. I'd probably start on LinkedIn. I would get like LinkedIn Sales Nav. I would build my filters there, right? So you're looking at like digital agencies. I'm not sure what their like category filter is like for digital agencies, but you could probably start with like an account filter, some sort of account keyword search. You know, like I probably wouldn't do blanket all digital agencies. I'd probably start with like SEO or PPC or like a very specific type, where you could start with a keyword level search on LinkedIn. So you kind of narrow it down to the geography you want to go at. So you start there, you push into, you pull the list into Clay. Then I think I would do some enrichments. And I know like certainly with LinkedIn, there's like number of followers that you can grab. I'm curious what other, like, I think I've seen Instagram. I haven't done much with social. So Clay team, what can you, like, what are some of the other social media networks you could go in and pull followers? Like,
You know, it's the world, right? Because of the Google search integration, which I think is the most slept on thing. Google has built the world's greatest scraper, and they're just letting you get access to it anytime. And so with the Google search, you'd be able to check Instagram follower count, TikTok count, Facebook page count, you know, and YouTube count, and all of those things in there. So yeah.
Tell me how you would do that, because that's a non-obvious way of using Clay.
Yeah. So what you would do is you need to use Google search operators. And so Google search operators are searches that you can put into Google where you can laser focus your search. So what I would do is I would put in site:instagram.com. And so this is basically saying, hey, Google, when you search for results, I only want results to be returned from Instagram.com. And then I would put in quotations their company name. Because when you put it in quotations, if I were to search for predictable revenue, it would bring me any Instagram account that ever has mentioned predictable, and it'd bring me every Instagram account that mentions revenue, and it'd bring me everyone who mentions predictable revenue. But when I put it in quotes, though, it's only going to bring things up if it says predictable revenue. And the way that SEO works, the first link is usually going to be the top one. And so you do site, Instagram.com, and then in quotations, their company name, scrape the first link that comes up. In the snippet that Google returns for you will probably be their followers. You could probably increase the accuracy of this if you search for the company name in quotations and then search for followers not in quotations. And then all that's going to do is just make it more likely that in the snippet, the follower count is going to be in there. And then you could either write a formula with the JavaScript to pull out the formulas, or you could just ask AI, like, how many followers does this person have, and only return the answer in numeral, like numbers, and you'd be set.
If anybody else went, I was like, I'm keeping up.
Oh.
But that's like, it's a great way of using. So it's basically a Google search operator, and then you push it into Clay. And then from that, you use an AI enrichment to say, hey, from this snippet of text, how many, from the body text, how many followers do they have?
Yeah. If you're ever Googling stuff for information and you always get your results from not even clicking into the link, but you can just do it straight from there, it's super easy to just automate that Google search. And if you do these things hundreds of times a day, just put it into Clay, and we have the Google search integration. And then instead of you manually doing all these things, you can just click a button. There's like one hack. Glassdoor has phenomenal revenue numbers, because if you're a private company who is putting or like I had a demo yesterday where they're like, I need revenue numbers. And I was like, you really don't. And they're like, no, but I really, really need it. I'm like, okay, if this company has 15 employees and I told you it has $25 million in revenue, like, would you believe me? He's like, I don't know. Is that what they're doing? And I'm like, probably not, but how would anybody know? And so I was just working with them, and I was like, fine, I'm just going to give you the secret. And so Glassdoor has such great revenue numbers because the HR department's not going to lie. The CEO has all kinds of reasons to lie to LinkedIn. They have all kinds of reasons to lie in the news. They have all kinds of reasons to overinflate things. But HR is like, whatever, it's $15 million. And so a really nice hack to get revenue numbers is that as well. You could do site, glassdoor.com, in quotes, company name. And then I would put like another operator, which we don't have to get too crazy, but it would just be in text revenue. And then the snippet there would say their revenue, and it's just probably the best source of like self-sourced revenue numbers on private companies.
That's money. While we're talking about Indeed, I want to talk about hiring and like looking for people. Let's say an intent signal for Rummy was the founders hiring a certain job title. I know there are a couple of integrations directly in Clay that you can run, predict leads, and I think Clay has one. I think there's maybe one on LinkedIn. What would you say is the best, are some of the ways that you would, look for like somebody who's hiring?
And so predict leads is one that we have tied into Clay immediately. And so then the other one that we have as well is the Google jobs listing. And so what I tell people is predict leads is a walled off garden. Rock is the founder, absolutely amazing founder. He's got really, really great data. We're very happy to be working with him. Predict leads is like a walled off garden where if they have the domain in their database, they got it. It's all very well structured. He's got it nailed. It's very up to date, and they're scraping it pretty often. The only problem with predict leads is if he doesn't have, the infinite amount of domains in his database, he's going to be missing it. So sometimes I like to layer it in, which is why you don't need one database, you need all of them. I like to layer in Google job listings as well, because while it'll be less accurate and won't be as structured, Google Jobs, if you ever search for, accounting roles in New York City, Google Jobs will tell you, we found this post on Indeed. We found this post on Glassdoor. We found this post on LinkedIn Jobs. Like they're scraping everybody and aggregating all of that data into the jobs. And so if you need everybody in your entire universe who's hiring for these roles, the combination between really highly accurate and structured data on predict leads is really great. And then if you can't get it there, you're going to miss a little bit of the structure, but you'll still get the signal, from Google Jobs.
Love it. Have you ever done any like just pure scraping on with Google search operators of Indeed? Of just like looking straight for.
Yeah, I just haven't done it because the predict leads one in the Google Jobs gets me as far as I need, but you could totally do that. And so a lot of the same things would apply. It would be site.indeed.com, and then you would put in.
We've done it before with the Chrome extension, and so
Oh, that's true as well too. Yeah.
we mapped. We've done that on Indeed before, where we map the what Indeed looks like, and then you pull that recipe into a Clay table once you've mapped to the page on the Chrome.
Done that a number of times using your guys' recipe.
Yeah,
On
perfect.
Indeed jobs. Yeah, works great.
So this is just that's a great call out, Varun, because there's one way where you can kind of start with like a search, like Eric's talking about, or you can start with like a target account list, and then you can try and enrich from there. But if say hiring for X is like where you want to start your account list,
very soon.
Do it. Because it's sometimes
to search to a LinkedIn jobs database and search for all the companies we're hiring for, software engineers in Cartagena. And we'll give you a list of companies.
That's awesome, because sometimes you want to start your search with this. And I don't know what Clay's been pretty strong for data. One of my big beefs with the big data companies is that they only refresh their file once a quarter.
Yeah.
And maybe some of them are doing it once a month now. But if you're only refreshing the file once a quarter, that means a job change or an intent signal or something you're building your inferences based on is old and out-of-date data. So one of the things I love about Clay, or love about just anything you can do with scraping, is you're scraping the stuff that's live and current right now. So if you're starting on Indeed and pushing in, like you could be grabbing jobs that were posted a few minutes ago, and now nobody else is capitalizing and using those as targeting. And so I think the scraper, whether it's Clay or something else, is a totally underrated move as a place to start.
This is all like seeming really complicated. Like the best thing with intent is like make it as easy and simple as possible, and then you can like slowly layer on complexity. It's like, hey, let's start with this thing. If it's a compelling message, they'll book meetings, and then as you start to understand how to use intent and understand what's working, you can slowly start to layer on some other things for, hey, I got a 0.25% conversion by being a little bit more targeted. You can slowly start layering it on. So if you're not an agency and you've never done intent before, I wouldn't have like paralysis by over analysis of like, oh my God, how do I do all these different things? And there's like Boolean searches that need to be involved, merge fields. I would just start like really, really simple. Like, hey, what's the number one reason why people want to buy for you? Okay, let's find that one trigger. And if that starts to work, then you can say, okay, now how do I improve this? And always aiming for like that 0.1% better, 0.2% better every month.
I love it. I know we got to wrap in a couple minutes here. I wanted to take a couple minutes and just shout out to Clay for joining us today. If people are, I know we've focused the whole time on Clay. If you're interested in Clay, Varun, what's the best way for people to sign up, to reach out, to get on the beta list?
Yeah, you can sign up on the website. If you shoot us a note, we'll let you off the wait list, and happy to give you access. And happy to help you guys build whatever you need and save you a bunch of time.
Right on. And if you're sitting here listening, so I will say the Clay Slack group, pardon me, if you have questions, is probably the most active Slack community I've been a part of. They are exceptionally helpful, and from a support perspective, you get almost instantaneous support in that Slack group. So if you are thinking about this, definitely check that out. If you listen to all this and you're a sales leader and you don't have time, you're like, yes, I want to sprinkle some enrichment and AI sauce all over my sales development team, but you don't have the time or capacity to do this. We at Predictable Revenue have been helping companies do this for the last couple of months. And we have a couple of different services that we are here to help with. So that's predictablerevenue.com. Pretty easy domain. You can email me or Gray, first name at predictablerevenue.com, and we'd be happy to chat and chat with you. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Rami, Victoria, Yash, everybody for joining and participating. Varun, Eric, Gray, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you all next time.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.